evening, everybody, and how are we all doing today? It is Sunday, the 19th of January, 2025, and we are here once again for our weekly live stream. Now, this week's question that I'm going to ask you is, what varieties of potatoes are you growing in 2025? But the first question I'm going to ask you before that, how many types of potatoes do you think exist? While you give me your answers on that, let's just see if we've got anybody in the comments. Over on Instagram, I can see a David Marston 24 has joined, Plot 27B Bristol has joined, and Ads Wood has joined. Welcome along. Please do feel free to comment and add to the conversation. I won't be able to, unfortunately, on Instagram, I can't bring the comments up, unlike what we can do on YouTube and Facebook. And here we've got Ballycillian saying, good evening, everyone. Good evening to you. We've got Adrian saying hello to Richard and all. Good evening to you. We've got Stuart Jackson. Sorry, all not about this week. I will catch up in the week. Good luck, team. See you all next week. A quick pop in and pop out from Stuart Jackson there. Turbo Stream, good evening, Veg Podcasters. Good evening to you. Digwell's there. Evening all. Good evening to you. Kate is there. Good evening, Veg Army. Good evening to you. We've got Nicola saying, evening, Richard and all. Still no heating, but they did manage to have a pipe burst in my attic that flooded through the ceiling and down my window in the kitchen. I feel for you. It must be so cold there, Nicola. Hope you're keeping warm. Anna Jones, good evening, gardeners. Good evening to you. Hargrave Gas, evening all. Hope you've had a great week. Good evening to you. The one, the only, Nigel, a.k.a. Muddy Boots, is back. Happy New Year, all. Good evening to you, Nigel. Hope you are well. Allotted Chef, a.k.a. Nathan, evening, all. Good evening to you. Richard Golden is there. Hello, all. Good evening to you. Graham Arnold, good evening, everyone. Hope you are well. Good evening to you. Gary is there. Evening, all. We'll have this on in the background whilst getting the kids sorted. Indeed, indeed. Scott is there. Good evening, all. Gary's also came in. 300 seems lots, but maybe. Good guess, but it's actually more than 300. Beddoes, evening veggies, growing now, yet still planning on what goes where when the frost is over. Rob's Allotment Gardening, good evening, all. Good evening to you. Nigel has came in with 5,000 varieties. Ooh, bit high there, bit high. Chili Cake says, hi, everyone. Happy Sunday evening. Digwell, 3,000 to 400. I reckon 90% not available in the UK, though. Yes. Anna Jones, 4,500. I should stipulate, I only know how many are in the UK. I didn't actually search how many in the world thinking about it. The Turbo Stream says, no idea on how many varieties of potatoes are there. Andrew Norris says, evening one and all, listening while walking my dog. And Rob has came with 3,500 as well. Over on Instagram, Team Ararat. So I think it is safe to say that there are lots and lots of different potato varieties. Now, in the UK, last time I asked, now this is going back a few years ago, so it might have changed now. It was about 5 years ago when I asked this question, but there was over 600 varieties of potatoes in the UK. 600 is an awful lot of potatoes. I think it becomes very, very difficult to choose what potato to grow, unless, of course, you have a tried and tested method, or you've used certain varieties of potatoes in the past and you know what you want. Now, like we said with tomatoes last week, there's many different types of potatoes. We've got first early, second earlies, and main crops. And then we've got some very, very early potatoes, very early main crops, some late main crops. The list is just becoming endless. And then, of course, we've got determinate or indeterminate, where you don't have to add more you don't have to add more compost to one of them, but I still recommend that you add more compost to cover over the potatoes to make sure they don't get any light. So I think the first question that I'm going to ask you guys is, have you started preparing your potato bed just yet? Now, I grow all my potatoes on my allotment, and what I've started doing, and I did this at the end of last year, when that bed became empty and I knew it was going to become for potatoes, 3 beds actually, I sowed a load of green manures And those green manures are specifically designed for potato beds. I'm a big fan of using green manures, as you know, but these ones are very good at fumigating the soil, clearing away any problems that we might have with potatoes, as well as making the nutrients or adding nutrients to the soil that potatoes need. Now, that was at the end of last year. At the end of this month, so probably not next weekend, the weekend after, I'm going to start tending to those beds. And that's why I'm going to cut down all that green manure and cover it over in black plastic to start warming up the soil. And then I will plant my potatoes out on St. Patrick's Day, the 20th of March. I always do it around St. Patrick's Day. Easier to remember, I think, than Easter. Easter this year, this is one of the reasons I don't do the traditional day of planting our potatoes at Easter. Easter this year is the 20th of April, which is really, really late in some ways. And that does tend to move. It could be the middle of March and it could be the late end of April. So that's why I avoid Easter. I tend to do it around St. Patrick's Day. Says Nigel just came in 17th of March. I may have got that wrong, but you get the idea. That's 20th of March. It's my stepdad's birthday, of course. That is what I aim to grow when I grow my potatoes. Turbo Extreme says, as long as they are fresh from the chip shop, then who cares? There's a particular variety that the chip shop prefer, funny enough. And do you know what they are? Bedo says, Asda sell about 5 types of fresh spuds. And this is a good question, actually. One of the things I'm experimenting this year is whether we can grow some of the products that we buy from a supermarket, including potatoes, and how well they compare. Digwell says no, and I think that means no, as in he hasn't started preparing any potato beds. Nigel says 24 30-litre pots still has old compost in it. So is that what you're growing your potatoes in old potato, in old compost, in old tubs? Chili Kate says the potato bed still has leeks in, but I have ordered the seed potatoes from the allotment shop. What varieties have you chosen? We'll get into that in a minute, actually. Turbo Stream says, I'm unsure if I will grow potatoes this year. I struggle to store them till I get round to eating them. They always sprout well before I can use them up. If you keep them somewhere completely dark, in theory, they shouldn't sprout, but also somewhere cool. I know that's easier said than done. I keep mine in a garage inside a cardboard box. My garage is quite dark and cool, and that doesn't lead them to sprouting. I've actually got some of this seed potato challenge, Digwell's single seed potato challenge. Those potatoes that I harvested, I can't remember, it was back in October, wasn't it? Those potatoes are still in my greenhouse and they have not sprouted or anything. I can't remember what variety Digwell said the single seed potato was, because I might try replanting some of those this year. Andrew says, my neighbour grew 2 varieties, Elva and Mona Lisa. The wild pigs grubbed up Elva, but not the other. Clearly you have discerning taste of spud. Interesting. That is very interesting indeed, that they only chose one of the type of one type of the varieties of potatoes. So Nigel says Maris Piper or King Edwards for chip shops. It's Maris Piper. Maris Piper is the traditional potato that chip shops choose. Again, when it comes to choosing potatoes, as I said, there's first earlies, second earlies, main crops, but there's also the uses of potatoes that varies from potato to potato. Salad, roasting, chipping, mashing, waxy or fluffy, and all those things. It becomes a bit of a nightmare to work out what potatoes to grow. And I do find that the all-rounders aren't as good as the others. Turbo Stream says, when I buy from a supermarket, I never check the variety. Not surprising. I mostly buy ones marked up as baking potatoes. Fair enough. Nicholas says, I found a load of old potatoes sprouting in the house. Just going to plant them and get some in sale. And get some in the plant sales. We'll start them in flower pots. Fantastic. Apparently, no single seed potato challenge for 2024 was Manito. I will make a note of that because I'm going to try growing those again. Rats dug up last year, says I was late getting them out, says Nicola. Performer is used in chip shops too. Single seed potato for 2023. There was McDonald's. I can't remember what it was. McDonald's have like 3 types of potatoes that they use, and they're specifically chosen because of their sort of length that they want for their chips as well. So Maris Piper's Performer is 2 examples. And Chili Cake says, just peeling some Maris Pipers for tonight's roast. Good choice. Maris Pipers are another great example of a good roaster and a good chipper, which is why they are on for my main crop list. So let's start off first early potatoes. How many of us is actually growing first early varieties, and what is your choice of first early varieties? Now, you may have seen I've already got mine. This is what sparked this conversation off, or gave me the idea for this conversation. I went into a garden centre and I saw that they were already selling potatoes. I like to get mine from the sort of pick and mix type things, and I got 4 different varieties of potatoes, and we're going to add more. So my first earlies, what did I say I've got? We've got, I can't remember. I cannot remember. I've forgot to grab my notes. I can remember my main crops I got was Maris Piper and King Edward, but I just can't remember. Oh, there was Maris Bard and I can't remember. My mind might get jogged. Graham says Pentland Javelin first early, second early Charlotte and Nicola. Good choices, good choices. Kate says I'll be doing Digwell single seed potato challenge, but that's the only spud I'm doing this year. Fair enough, fair enough. Manito out of stock everywhere. Well, I've got a few that we haven't eaten yet. I'm going to try and save. I bought Hargrave Gas says I bought 2 big bags of potatoes from same bin in Tesco's last week. Same price, same description, but when I got them home, I saw there were 2 completely different varieties. Doesn't surprise me at all. Over on Instagram, Amanda Joy has joined. Welcome along, lovely to see you. Nicholas says Charlotte's as her choice of potatoes. Turbo Stream says I just checked my bag in potatoes, Melody and Cultra, both from Aldi. I've never heard of those varieties. Rob says, I always grow Pentland Javelin. That's one that's been mentioned before. Seems like a popular one. First early spuds, Winston White and Casablanca. What? I think Casablanca is the garlic. I can't remember my other one now. Nigel, first early, Swift first, Charlotte seconds, Sarpo Myra mains. Now, Sarpo's, of course, being a blight-resistant type. I don't find... I've grown them... I do grow Sarpo Myra particularly every year, just to guarantee I will get some potatoes. But I don't find them to be that good in when they've grown, or the actual potatoes themselves. I don't know if anybody else has found that. That might just be me. Chili Cake says, we've not ordered any first earlies this year. We didn't get much from them last year. We might change our mind, of course. So the main reason that I grow first earlies, of course, you don't get that many. I mean, you can do things to try and get more. But the main reason I grow first earlies is I plant them in March, as I've already said. And I will probably start harvesting, depending on the variety, by about the end of May, middle of June. And they are just there. Once our potatoes that we have in storage have used up, we've then got these to follow on, mostly for salad potatoes, but they're just a way for me of making sure we have potatoes all year round, which is why I grow first earlies. Admittedly, as you know, I've cut out carbs at the moment. I'm on a diet, which I'm hoping I'm starting to look a little bit lighter. I've lost 9 pounds since the beginning of the year, so I think I'm doing quite well. But yeah, the carbs I have cut out, so I probably shouldn't grow first earlies, but you never know. But yeah, they don't perform, or you don't get as good a potatoes as your main crops, but that's the point of growing first earlies, an earlier crop to give you those, ideally for like a barbecue or salad crops, is what I think they come into their own. Buddy Silly says Charlotte, Lady Christie, and Maris Pia. Good choices there. International Kidney, if you can get them, otherwise known as Jersey Royals, if you were growing them in Jersey, of course. Good choice, though. Very good choice. I like Cara as a main crop. I like those as well, actually. A very good one. Scott says, my favourite variety must be pink fir apple potatoes for taste or rate. Or rate. Not sure what that is. But I was just thinking about the pink fir apples. Now, the pink fir apples, they don't really look like potatoes, do they? They look like almost like ginger, a knobbly piece. But I do think they are one of the best tasting potatoes out there. Well, why they're called pink fir apple is beyond me, but they do taste absolutely delicious. And they actually grow quite well here, I found as well. It's just you waste so much in harvesting. Gary says, I read a book where an old-timer recommended Desiree. I tried it and got a bumper crop, so tend to choose that. Earliest I've got Charlotte to grow in bags. Excellent. Again, I think with all the varieties out there, there's a scope to try and find what potatoes grows best in your particular garden, in your particular allotment, because I do think the soil and everything else does make a difference to how good the potatoes are when they grow. Different conditions and different potatoes do better in. Turbo Stream says, I have a bag of potatoes in my allotment shed covered in the leaf mold I made. I should really check if they are okay. Completely forgot about them, to be honest. And you just went and brought some more. Nicholas says, well done, Richard. You can eat potatoes. Potatoes are a carb. I'm laying off the carbs. That's why I'm laying off them at the moment. I probably will eat them later on in the year. And there's, of course, days when you're having a Friday is a blowout day. So I might have fish and chips on that day. But on a whole, I'm losing weight. I'm trying to do my best here. Digwell says Vivaldi is 36% fewer carbs. Excellent. And Digwell says PFA, pink fir apple, out of stock in most places. I have to admit, actually, and I'm not surprised in some ways, but even the choices in the garden centres don't seem quite as good as what we've had in the past. The choice of potatoes do seem quite limited like this year. There was somebody, Jenny, who unfortunately has got family tonight. She was asking us about Purple Majesty potatoes, and we can't seem to get those anywhere either. So there is a problem with potatoes this year. Nicholas says, if you cook potato or other starch foods and let them cool and cook the following day, then you have less starch. Yeah, good tip. British Queen is a good variety, says Nigel. Turbo Stream says, I bought seeded potatoes last year, no idea what they were. Maris Peer rings a bell. I think it's so important to write a label I'd say that with any plant I grow, write a label before I sow the seeds. Same with potatoes, write a label so that we know what potatoes are where. And it's the same when I go to these garden centres. What I tend to do, as I said, I like the ones where you can pick out your own seed potatoes and you pop them in a bag. I usually write on that bag or what that variety of potatoes are as I'm filling it up, so that I know. I always have a pen on me, so it's quite easy to do. But the top tip there, take a pen with you. If you go into a garden centre to buy potatoes, and take a pen. Turbo Stream, I bought a bag of baking potatoes, or as the ones I grew were tiddlers. I'm hoping to get into that in a minute, actually. Nigel says, is there any potato days events anywhere? Don't seem popular since the pandemic. I haven't actually seen any advertised, but I'm sure there will be. I know CD Sunday is in a couple of weeks' time. I don't think I'm going to go this year. I'm not sure. But they did do potatoes there, which might be a reason to go. I'm debating at the moment. They haven't invited me on stage again, so that might be a reason why I don't want to go. Jokes aside, I don't know of any potato days off the top of my head. Nicholas says, is it due to all the rain and wet weather last year? Lack of spuds. So I'm not sure what it is. The weather last year was pretty poor, but I thought last year's weather would have produced some good spuds, because potatoes generally like moist, cool sort of weather. As long as the soil's, they're very thirsty, hungry plants. in theory, you should get better potatoes. So I'm not sure why it happened last year, what it was about last year for the lack of spuds. Digwa says if you freeze bread, it has less carbs. I've cut out bread completely, personally. Tell me, I kept the seed potato bag, but it's at the allotment shed, so I am going to the allotment to find out. Absolutely, absolutely. And Digwa says most UK seed spuds come from Scotland. Yeah, that's what I found with the one I go to. That all their potatoes are labelled from a Scottish company to get in. So moving on from that, second early potatoes. I haven't got any second early potatoes just yet. I really want to get some acoustic. I really want to get some Charlotte or international kidney or something. But second early, Digwell's actually said second early spuds, Charlotte, white kestrel coloured, Nadine, white osprey coloured. Excuse me, I've got hair in my mouth. Again, all good varieties, all very good varieties. The trouble is, I think we are a little bit limited with what potato varieties we can actually buy because they're getting harder and harder to get hold of this year. But certainly second earlies, I haven't got them yet. I want acoustic and probably something along those lines as well. Well, we got Nigel says JBA are my first to go when searching. And Anna says, I have 2 kilograms of kestrels to plant and some organic potato food. Grow them every year. Usually avoid blight if planted in April. Good stuff. Good stuff. Rob says, never done any good with Charlotte. They can be a bit finicky. But it's not surprising. Chili Cake says, second early Charlotte to be grown at home in 40-litre tubs. Good idea. Good idea. Nigel, a lot the JBA Digwell, sorry to Nigel. JBA sponsoring the SSPC 2025. Excellent. Nicholas says, I will buy in Jersey from supermarket and plant them. They technically won't be Jersey Royals then. They would be, what would they be called? I said it earlier. The international kidney. That's the one I'm looking for. Nigel says Home Guard was another variety I like, but I cannot find. You know what? Home Guard is one of my favourite varieties of potatoes. I've grown it many times in the past, but it's getting harder and harder to get hold of. A listener, when I mentioned it on the podcast, a listener actually found it in his garden centre and sent me a bag of Home Guard, which was really, really nice of him. But absolutely, really, really one of my favourite varieties there, but just so hard to get hold of these days. Turbo Extreme says, I'm off wheat as something gives me acid reflux, so back on the exclusion diet till I find out the culprit. Had my last toast today. I really like toast and butter though. Toast, butter and jam. Lovely, lovely. Digwell, Jersey Royal and International Kidneys are one and the same. Yeah, Jersey Royal and International Kidneys are basically the same potatoes, but you can't call your International Kidney Jersey Royals unless they are grown in Jersey. Same as Champagne has to be made in the Champagne region of France. And Cornish pasties can only be called Cornish pasties if they're made in Cornwall. As I understand it, it's that, I can't think what the rule is, one of those EU rules that it makes sense. It makes sense. I can't think what the definition or how to word it correctly there, but it is Jersey Royals International Kidney, same thing, except grown in Jersey. Turbo Stream, toast, butter, and my homemade gooseberry jam. Yum, yum, yum. Oh, we do like jam. We do like jam. So, what about main crops? What about main crops as well then? As I said, I am growing, what did I say? Maris Piper and King Edward. I might throw a few more in there. I might throw some more main crops in there. I'm trying, in all honesty, I want to grow more main crop potatoes than I grow for my first earlies and second earlies. The reason being is that we tend to eat main crops more during the winter. But as our first earlies and second earlies come out, we can actually replant those with some of the other crops. So leeks might follow our first earlies as an example, which means I get plenty of use out of one bed, which is something I quite like doing. But main crops we don't harvest till October, November, so we don't really have a chance to put any more in that beds. Where were we? Nicholas says, Digwell, I know, but I can't get international kinning in the garden centre, so it's a way of getting a potato to grow. Digwell says, Cornish pasties don't have location right. Downing's Cornish pasties are made in Devon. I thought they did, or perhaps they were trying to get it. I thought they did have something, the location right. It was, yeah. Another one in short supply, talking about the Jersey Royals. Mixed spuds, Apache coloured, Java coloured. Yeah, it sounds about right. That's the two that McDonald's uses for their potatoes. I saw a recipe today for jam, says Nicola. Fruit with chia seeds, no sugar, can use a sugar alternative sweetener. Interesting. Main crop, Picasso and Java. We had a phenomenal crop with Java last year. Isn't Java quite a recent potato? Roxy, I haven't. Isn't it sort of only just appeared on the market, if I remember correctly? Oh, MC Spuds. Sorry, main crop spuds, not McDonald's spuds. Sorry, Apache and coloured and Java coloured. Sorry. I thought you were correcting on what I said earlier. I thought you had gone there, tapped away to find out what potatoes McDonald's use. Hello, Gal. Roxy's down here. I could hear her pouring at the carpet. What have we got? Ginsters is not in Cornwall either. Okay, I stand corrected. I thought there was they had location rights for the Cornish pasty. I know they do for Champagne. That's a better example, even though Champagne was invented near Brighton. Digwa says Java is a new one. Yes, I knew it was. Excellent. Anybody else growing any other main crop potatoes and anybody growing a type of potato they've never grown before? Going to throw that question out there because I'm always looking for different potatoes. How do you know what potato you've grown or what potato grows best for you? Because I find it's a lot of trial and error. But if you were to grow every single type of potato, all 600, maybe more that exist in the UK, you wouldn't have the room to grow anything else. Turbo Stream says, I've made chia seeds jam before. Really nice. Lasts about a week if you use honey instead of sugar. Ideal for small amounts of fruit in a small jar. Interesting. I have to share the recipe. Isn't cheddar cheese the same? I don't know. I grew Java last year. Very, very nice. Fantastic. Java, says Chili Kate, is the next generation of Sapo Myra. Blight resistant, but also very tasty. Okay, I might give Java a go because, as I said, the Sapo varieties, Sapo Myra, there's many others, like we discussed with the blight resistant tomatoes last week. The Sapo varieties, I don't think taste quite as good, but a guaranteed crop if you do get a lot of blight like we do. And they are a pretty good one. So yeah, I'm going to have to try Java. I think you guys have convinced me to try Java. Gary says 600 varieties. I'm going to need a bigger allotment. Exactly. There's so many varieties. It's hard to know unless you grow every single one. What's best? Digwell says, and of course, the other one I'm growing is the SSPC 2025 invitation video. It's just gone online now. Count me in, Digwell. You know I want to be in that. Rob says, Red Leicester can only be made in Leicester. Oh, there we go. And Nigel says, I grew main crop blight resistant. Java last year had poor return and is a cross between St. Myra and Valor. Interesting. But they gave you a poor return. Again, this is why I say the chili said it did well for them. Nigel says it did poor for him. There's different conditions. It's all about finding that right potato for your particular circumstances that does well. Tomo Stream says, I think I just cooked the fruit down in the pan, added a teaspoon of chia seeds and added honey to taste at the end. Certainly didn't involve a big jam pan. Oh, nice. And Digwell also confirms that Java is a cross between Sapo Myra and Vala. Digwell says, I was getting 2.5 kilograms per spud per seed spud from Java. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'm going to have to try it out this year. So let's. One of the things I've said that I want to try and get you guys doing more is sending in videos. And this is slightly off topic. We're just going to take a quick break here, and we will come back to this conversation. But Kate has sent us a video this week. So let's go have a look and see what this is. I have to admit, though, I did edit this slightly. Hopefully it's okay for you, Kate, what I've got.
So now I'm just going to take this out of here. That came out nice and easily. And now what I normally do is I just split the sponge. It does break some of the root a little, but if you're quite gentle, as you can see here, it will come off. Sorry, I'm not used to filming much, so I'm probably going to get in the way. You see that actually is just sliding off the root, so it's not actually breaking the root. Now this is one of my sweet peas that I was trying. I'm just trialing it in the hydroponic. This is actually one from Digwell. This is Niall's sweet peas, I believe. You can see that's coming off pretty easily there. So I don't worry about changing them, about moving them into a new pot. I'll leave a little bit of that on, that's not a problem at all. And there we are. So that's now ready to go and be planted.
There we go. That was Kate Spratt there with her little video showing hydroponic gardening, or how she starts a sweet pea, I think that was, in hydroponics and then goes on to pot it on. We spoke about hydroponics a couple of weeks ago. As you can see, my hydroponic is here in the background. What I'm really pleased with, I know this is a bit of a topical debate, but we've actually got, well, it might be better if I switch to this one. We've actually got a little tomato. This is the mini bell tomato, which, as you know, isn't our favourite, but it has germinated and it is growing quite well there. So let's go back to the comments. Chili Cake says, I'll repost my harvest photo on Facebook. Please do. That would be great. Tabo Stream says, my friend used to grow a red potato on his allotment. I'm still digging them up 3 years after he died. That's one of the things and this is something actually I was going to talk about next. How do you grow your potatoes? Do you grow your potatoes in the ground or in pots? What do you feed your potatoes? That's kind of the next thing that I want to talk about. I used to grow all my potatoes in pots because I figured it was easier to harvest and also meant that we were less likely to have any volunteers in the bed. But I've moved back to growing them in the ground because they just tend to don't need as much watering, was my theory, and don't cost us as much in compost. But how do you grow your potatoes? Any tips and tricks as well? Nigel says, grew Sapo Myra and Java in tubs. Same condition. Sapo outperformed in both volume and size. Fantastic. There we go. Probably got similar return to Digwell. There we go. It's just different conditions. Everybody's garden's different, and that means that our plants respond differently. Some people do better, some people don't do as good. Digwell says, looks like a let pot. I think it is a let pot. In fact, Kate says it is indeed a let pot. Scott says, Oca is not a potato, but a good alternative and no known pests. It was introduced to Europe as an alternative to potato, but didn't take off. It's popular in New Zealand. I have actually grown Oca before. I didn't find they performed very well, in all honesty, and they were very fiddly to try and do anything with. I might try and grow them again. I just didn't find it worked for me as well. Digwell actually says on that same note, I'm growing Oca again this year. They have a lemony taste and sow and forget crop, which is true. They were certainly a sow and forget crop. And they did well. They were just so small, very knobbly, and were difficult to really get anything decent out of them, I found. Turbo Swim says, certainly a good root on that plant. Most impressive, Kate. And Rob says, I grow all of mine in tubs, talking about potatoes. All of Rob's are grown in tubs. Digwell says, volunteer spuds are one of the main causes of blight. That's the trouble when growing them in the ground. But I still do grow mine in the ground anyway and just dig it over. Charles Dowden apparently has grown spuds in the same bed for 11 years. It's blight, that's the problem, which isn't a soil-borne disease. It's I forget what it is off the top of my head. Turbo Stream says, I grew my potatoes in the ground last year. The slugs have most of them. The ones that left, I spiked with my fork. That's one of the troubles with preparing them or growing them in the ground. You do tend to spike them with a fork. I did that in a video when I harvested my potatoes. The amount that I spiked with a fork, I just had to eat those first. But they did sort of look after my soil a bit better on the other side of it. Scott says, Digwell green fingers. The foliage is edible as well, and the lemony taste come from xylic acid. Talking about the Oca there. Nicola, I grew in tubs, but also on top, cover with grass clippings. Over on Instagram, Let's Grow Home has joined. Welcome along. Again, yeah, I actually use grass clippings a lot as a mulch on my potatoes. I'd love to be able to use compost. Compost is probably the best because it's full of nutrients. It's full of all the good stuff that we need. But being able to produce enough compost to grow for my spuds and everything else is just a pretty difficult thing. I'm trying, and I'm going to keep trying, but I just can't seem to produce enough compost, which is one of the reasons I grow potatoes in the ground. And I use grass clippings as a mulch, which work quite well. It does work very well, actually. Anna Jones says, in the ground with a covering of fleece for the first 2 weeks in case of frost. I think you're quite a bit further up north than me, but by mid-March is almost, well, I was about to say there's almost no risk of frost here, but actually that's not true because we can have a frost up until sort of end of April thinking about it. So it could happen. It could happen. It'd just only probably be a light frost for us. Nigel says, grow all my spuds in 30-litre pots. Use old compost mixed with well-rotted manure and grow more. Cover top 5 centimetres with straw and never had an issue with drying out. So so you had grow more and well-rotted and you use the same pots. Do you... I was going to ask, how do you grow them? Do you top up the compost as they grow, or do you just bury them at a depth and let them get on with it? Graham says, I'm near the fernlands. The most common potatoes they grow are Cara, so presumably they do well in the soil. I would guess so. That would be why. Digwell says, just wash up Oca and eat it. No prep needed. Use them in salads and uncooked. The trouble I had with Oca is couch grass. Roots would go through the Oca as well. So it wasn't easy at all. Turbo Stream says, I might try a few of the volunteer potatoes in the Wilco bags I bought a few years ago if I do grow again. Probably won't, but fresh seed potatoes. Probably won't buy fresh seed potatoes this year. Absolutely. I mean, a couple of years ago, what I actually did, and this was a thing post-COVID, I actually grew extra plants of every variety I was growing in order to save the potatoes for seeds. It worked. It worked very well, actually. We did actually manage to save some potato seeds, but I don't think I would ever do that again. Nicholas is airborne blight. That's why they say don't plant tomatoes and potatoes close together. Blight will spread between the two. Absolutely. Scott says, I've grown potatoes under and in straw. They worked well. I think it was a no-dig method. Straw always works. Straw always works. I did try it with straw a few years ago, but it didn't do as good. But that was fresh straw that hadn't rotted down. Nicola, grass clippings help prevent scab. Scab can be caused by too much nutrition in the soil. And if you use like horse manure, so I asked an expert potato grower this question because I used to be able to get really well rotted horse manure that I used to fill my beds up. And I asked him if it was going to be okay for potatoes. And he just said, you just might get a lot of scab. So I'm still after some more horse manure. We just can't get it anymore. But yeah. Anna, fleece flat on the ground or raised by hoops, etc. Good question. Good question. Thank you, Gary. Blight is an airborne fungus, but if a plant gets it and the disease travels down to the tubers, then the volunteers grow with it already, infecting the new plants. Yeah. Chili Cake says, we grew the earlies at home so we can get them easily for dinner and the main crop in the ground on the allotment. Funny enough, I'm still debating what to do because I tend to grow all my potatoes on the allotment. I don't tend to grow many potatoes here at home, but I do have some potato buckets. I've got 10 of them that basically don't really get used because I grow mine in the ground. And I'm thinking, do I grow potatoes in those? I actually use them for the single seed potato challenge. Excuse me. Do I grow potatoes in those here at home as well? Or do I grow them down on the allotment? I'm still debating. But you guys give me some ideas. I'm going to have to get some Java anyway. Nicholas says, I reuse some compost in tubs and as a new compost and blood, fish and bone. Excellent stuff. Get rid of the couch grass. I'm trying. I've been trying for years. It is bad on my plot and potatoes actually help with getting rid of couch grass, I've discovered. So the trouble with couch grass that I have on my allotment is that it grows everywhere. You can remove it, but it just comes back and back and back, and it is a big problem. What I've learned, part of my routine is I grow potatoes. Obviously, when you're growing potatoes, you're mulching, you're covering them over, and you're digging through the soil to remove the potatoes. So I remove roots at the same time. But things like green manures also help as well. But it's a tackle with couch grass. Nigel says, tubs are filled and planted, no topping up, have broken young homes in history when topping up. Interesting. So you must put your potatoes down much deeper than we would if we were topping them up, I'm guessing. Turbo Extreme says, my friend never brought seed potatoes. He used to plant supermarket ones. That's an experiment we're doing this year as well. Anna Jones says, usually just flat, talking about her fleece. They get clobbered by the frost in the new year without it. Kate says, quite a few of my potatoes got hit by slugs last year. Slugs were a big problem last year, let's face it. Slugs and snails were a big problem because it was ideal conditions for them. We had a mild winter, a wet spring, and a not very warm summer. So slugs and snails were a big problem. And so what we really need to do is nematodes or encourage the birds in to take care of slugs and snails. Digwell says spuds prefer and need a low pH between 5.5 and 7. Absolutely right. And Nigel says scabs can be caused by soil drying out. Absolutely. Lots of reasons for scab, really, isn't it? Gary thinks, Nicola, you can summon my horse poo, Richard. I need lots of it. It's getting it is the trouble. Turbo Stream, nothing worse than lifting potatoes and finding they were mostly full of slugs. Yeah. Totally. Ernie is back. Good evening to you, Ernie. Good evening, everyone, he says. Good evening, Ernie. Scab is also caused by poor watering. Yeah, it's a whole host of things that can cause scab. But you got to remember, when I asked this bloke, I was talking about literally just growing them in well-watered horse manure. Common scab, too dry, powdery scab, too wet. Yeah, it's a whole host of things, isn't it? Rob says slugs and wireworm is the reason I grow in tubs. I'm hoping that by growing these green manures, that's going to reduce this the wireworm. Actually, that's one of the things it says it reduces. What have we got? This potato growing lark is hard work, isn't it? It is, but it's a staple. It is a staple. This is one of those most common things that we grow, that we eat regularly. Nicholas says, grow where you can through black weed suppressant or black plastic to help reduce the couch grass. I don't like the stuff. My neighbours had it, and I've spoken about this many times. My neighbours had it on theirs. It got blown up in the wind, caught in my gooseberries, and I got these tiny little ribbons of black plastic all in my gooseberries. It's a pain in the bottom, to say the least. Gary says, what additive lowers the soil pH? Trying to think back to old science lessons to whether lower pH is acidic or not. You got me thinking. I'm on the spot here. I'm trying to think myself. I'm hoping somebody would answer that for you. I think you add lime to lower the pH, which makes it more alkaline. No, you add lime to higher the pH, which makes it more alkaline, if I remember correctly. Got my brain running there. Digwell says scabby spuds are still edible. So this is an interesting point, actually. Scabby spuds are certainly still edible, but are they? But I find it's the same with canker parsnips. They're still edible, but it does pop people off. It's something to think about, isn't it? Chickens are good for wireworm. They love them. Indeed, they do. Chili Cat says to lower pH, add organic matter and more acidic. There we go. Manure will lower the pH. There we go. Nicholas says you can also get paper weed suppressant. Well, I've seen that actually. It lasts a few years, especially if you mulch on top of paper. Trouble is the couch grass is so prolific, it will still grow through it. It is a difficult one, couch grass. It's a horrible one. Just needs a slight bit of weed and it comes back. Now, this looks like a good time to go to the soup challenge, or not so much a challenge, the recipe of the week. You wanted me to cook parsnip and ginger soup because we harvested our first ginger ever last year. So let's go to that. Okay, this week you wanted me to make a parsnip and ginger soup. I prepared the ingredients and I'll show you how I'm going to make it. So I'm keeping this one quite simple. 1 onion, some small parsnips, piece of ginger, and of course some vegetable stock. We will add some garlic and some bits of seasoning as well, but I'm just keeping this simple. All of this is homegrown. The onions, the parsnips, the ginger, and the stock. I think that is a turkey stock that we had left over from what we had on Christmas dinner. So this is our homemade turkey stock as well. And of course we're going to use our blender / soup maker to make this. So pop the lid off. I'm going to throw all the ingredients in. I've roughly chopped the onions. I'll put the onions in first, followed by the parsnips and the ginger. Make sure everything goes in there. You don't want anything left over. And then we'll add in the stock. I'm not going to make a huge amount of soup with that. We're going to add a bit more water to that. Just to make it, see. And there we go. I think that looks a little bit better. So, on with the lid. We'll turn it on. And then, how do I do this? Remind me. Smooth soup. 30 minutes later, as it says, we'll see what happens. Okay, so it is cooked, and I got to admit, the colour on it isn't what I was expecting. I was certainly expecting it to be more white than this sort of grey colour. This is quite simple parsnip and ginger soup. That's very nice. Although when that ginger kicks in, Christ, that ginger is hot. I mean, that is homegrown good ginger, so that, that's good. That is good, but that's nice. So, as you know, we're doing a scoring, and I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10. I'm really happy with that. That's good. Back to the studio. Indeed, so that was a parsnip and ginger soup. I've got to admit, that ginger, my homegrown ginger, has got a real kick to it. It's really, really good. I actually found that as I continue with eating, a little bit overpowering with the ginger. But, I don't know if anybody else out there grows their own ginger. Highly recommend it because it is so good. Now, Rob says, never use lime with your potatoes. Why not, Rob? Why not? Tell us why not. Digwa says, if you're susceptible to wireworm or earworm, then grow a resistant variety. Look and search for them on the potato variety database. Absolutely. Although, as I said, the green manure that I put down last year is meant to get rid of wireworm and earworm as well, as one of the reasons behind why it's specifically designed for spuds. Hargrave Gas says, after seeing that soup maker last time, I had to have one. So that was my Christmas present. It's a good one, isn't it? It's a more of a blender, but it does the soup making thing. And I love using it now. We have that soup maker. It really is good. Can do an awful lot, but heavy and difficult to clean. It's got its own clean function. We use that. It's easy. Turbo Stream says, glad it tasted nicer than it looked. Yeah, it wasn't great the way it looked. Very grey looking, but it tasted good. That's the main thing. Digwa says, you may get better results with a soup maker if you use the saute function to cook the onions and ginger first before the soup mode kicks in. Yeah, that's an idea. I might try that actually next time. I haven't really thought about using the saute mode on that before, but I'll try that. Anna Jones says, my kestrel never get wireworm, but other varieties I've tried have been badly affected. Is kestrel a wireworm resistant? Is kestrel a wireworm resistant variety? Now, Digwell says, lime raises the pH opposite of what potatoes want. Thank you. That's the exact description I needed there. Nicholas says, you use red onions? Yes. So we do have white onions as well, but my wife prefers red onions. She puts it down to her Indian heritage. So we tend to only have red onions in our house. That's it. She puts it down to Indian heritage. My soups look better than they taste. Yeah. I sort of don't really eat many soups anymore. I used to, but I don't really anymore. Chili Phil says, we brought that soup maker last week, got loads of use already. We use the chop and saute mode, excellent bit of kit. The clean function makes life easy. Absolutely. The clean function even heats the water up to clean it, doesn't it? It's a good bit of kit. My wife, we used to have a KitchenAid blender which died, unfortunately, after quite a few years, and we sort of were looking into other blenders. We tried one other make, but that broke after a week, so we sent it back and we got that Ninja one. And I tell you what, that Ninja one is worth every penny, not just because it has the soup function, but everything about it does well. 1 pint of water, 3 drops of fairy liquid and press clean. Absolutely. That will colour your soup. Maybe, but we prefer red onions. Andrew says, sadly got to go. Supper beckons. Thanks, Richard. Great show. Nice people. Good company. Catch up with you next week. Andrew, take care. Lovely to see you. Gary says, I've been trying to wash it up without getting the electrics wet. Thanks. Yeah, literally, you just pour water into it, a few drops of fairy liquid, and push the clean function, and it cleans itself. It's great because it heats the water and liquid up, and it gets the blender running every now and then. So easy to clean. Doesn't do the outside, of course, but yeah. Chili Phil says, we had leftover cauliflower cheese and used that to make soup. Tasted amazing. Oh, that sounds nice. That does sound nice. Don't forget, guys, I need a recipe you would like me to cook next week. One thing, I know sometimes you guys need a bit of a hint about what we've harvested. And I've started putting a harvest report back on the website every week. I'm trying to get it every Tuesday. But every week we're trying to share what we've harvested over this last week. As I've said to you, we're trying to grow £8,000 worth of food this year. So I need to keep a record of it. We've harvested turmeric, leeks, a cabbage, a cauliflower. What else? I think we might have a couple of turnips we can harvest, a couple of parsnips. So up to you guys what you would like me to cook next week. Digwell says Kestrel has golden eelworm and partial white eelworm resistance. There we go. Was it Anna who was asking about that? Turbo Stream says, I'm not going to try soups again. Far easier from a can. Sacrilege, I know. Whatever makes you happy, my friend. Whatever makes you happy. Is that pounds, Richard, or weight? Pounds, value, cash. £8,000 worth of value in our food that we want to grow. Rob says, my wife just uses an old handheld blender to make soup. I've got one of those for making paper, funnily enough, because I'm trying to have a go at making seed paper this year. There's a bit of a reason behind that, but that I will reveal later on in the year. We used to use a hand blender a lot, but that kitchen blender is so much better. Turbo Stu says, I've been making a veggie bake recently, tomatoes, onions, butternut squash, etc. I bake in a baking dish until soft and then crack an egg on top and bake it till the egg is done. That sounds nice. That sounds very nice. Again, I'm all after these healthy dishes, trying to be healthy, trying to be good. So I do need a recipe or something to cook for next week's show. Has anybody got any tips or tricks to throw in there for growing potatoes? How often do you feed? What would you say is the real secret to getting big potatoes? I'm talking the big jacket potatoes. What would you do? What would you do with that? Chili Kate says, how about the Hairy Dieters lasagna? Uses leeks layers instead of pasta. I can do that. I can certainly do that. I've made that before. I was quite impressed with it, actually. I've got that book as well. The Hairy Bikers, or the Hairy Dieters, as they call themselves, for that lasagna. If everybody agrees with that, I can do that next week. Although Scott has come in with recipe for next week, golden egg curry. If you have turmeric, Nigella Lawson has a good recipe. I do have turmeric. I harvested a load of turmeric in order to, because it was ready. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do with that turmeric root and how we process it to make it good for lasting. Nicholas says put grass clippings in with seed potato to help prevent scab. Good idea. And go for the hairy biker recipe. Hairy biker recipe so far. But keep anybody got any other ideas and throw your vote behind each one. Yeah. So one of the things I tend to use when it comes to fertilizer, there is a specific fertilizer for potatoes. Does anybody use that, or do they just use something like Growmore or any of the others? Scott says can be made in a soup maker, talking about the golden egg curry. And Digwell says, I've just mixed my frozen tomato sauce from 2024 with the Schwartz garlic and mushroom mix to use as a pasta sauce. Bloody lovely. Yummy, yummy, yummy. That's one of the great advantages of freezing loads of tomatoes, isn't it? You can do that. League lasagna sounds fun, says Gary. We earth up twice and then third time use grass clippings. Absolutely. We haven't really talked about earthing up, really. Because I don't tend to earth up so much. I tend to add compost because mine are all in beds and I'm mulching with a compost. So I don't earth up, but I just throw down compost instead. Remember to give us a thumbs up, everyone. As Nicholas says, please do give us a thumbs up, a like, a follow, a subscribe, and click the notification so you know when we go live. Digwa says, no feed for potatoes after planting. Do it all when the seed spud goes in. That's an interesting way. And Digwell says, no earthing up for me. I plant deep. Excellent. How deep do you plant yours in order to do this? Gary says, how far apart do you plant potatoes? Between potatoes and then between rows. I never seem to have enough room to earth up properly. So I don't actually grow mine in rows. This is me personally. Because I dedicate an entire bed to the first earlies, another bed to the second earlies, and another bed to the main crops. What I tend to do instead, which I think works much better for me, is I just give my potatoes 30 centimetres of space. A bit like sweet corn, I'm planting them in blocks. So 30 centimetres of space and then another potato. Main crops, especially the bigger ones, I give a little bit more room. I give 45 centimetres of space. And then in goes the potatoes and we earth up as we grow. Or we don't earth up, we add compost on top. Remember, though, I'm on a heavy clay soil that is prone to waterlogging. So we do have to be careful with, if we plant too deep, the potatoes will rot and not grow. Turbo Stream says, I dug trenches last year and pot in a handful of chicken manure pellets. Looks like 3 bodies buried for a while. Yeah. I use the bulb planters for potatoes. That works quite well, I find. Nicholas says, in buckets when chitted or some small amount of leaf, I just fill the bucket to the top. And spacing, says Nigel, spacing depending on type, main crop need more space. Yeah, does make a difference. As I said, 30 centimetres is what I give all the way round, and then 45 centimetres for main crops in order to try and get bigger potatoes. One other thing I want to ask everybody, do you chit your potatoes? Do you chit your potatoes? Let me know. But I always do, and I say this every year. I buy my potatoes, they're going to chit anyway, so I might as well pop that into some sort of controlled. If they didn't chit, then I wouldn't bother. But I do chip my potatoes in order to control it. Nicholas says earlies 4 in 30 litre in 2 layers, and mains 2 seeds pots in 30s. Excellent. And Digwet says, funny how every supplier has a different mix for potato fertilizer. I look for one added SO3 and MGO, usually with the Alexa mix 920 plus 9.5%. Oh, a lot of figures there. Then Nigel says, chitting, yes, because they are in a greenhouse weeks before planting out. Exactly. This is my stance on it. If you pot them in a dark cupboard, okay, it depends on the temperature, but they're going to chit anyway. They're going to start trying to grow anyway. So I figured, my theory is we pot them in a greenhouse, we can then control the chits. I earthed up as they grow. The potatoes still come to the surface and went green. The foxes didn't help by digging about in the rows. This is one of the troubles, actually, because I know exactly what's gone on. And when you earth up your potatoes, the potatoes are obviously growing, and the potatoes get exposed to the sun and therefore growing green. And I believe that can also be poisonous. But what's probably happening, and I know turbo stream's on a clay soil, is as that soil's getting damp, it's compacting down and exposing the potatoes. This is another reason why I tend to try and use compost and grass clattings to really try and get that down. The SA3 lowers the pH, and SA3 says, Nigel, it's obviously the fertilizer called SO3. Nicholas says they tend to do it on their own, but started potting in compost in small pots. Yeah, I don't put mine in compost. I just put mine in the tray in light. It's somewhere cool. Nigel says sulfur trioxide is no longer in our allotment shop. Is that a good one to use? And allotment tool says I sowed some spuds in December. The frost won't reach a foot down, which is true. It's very true. Depending on where you are, though, it could, if you are somewhere very, very cold. If I remember correctly, you're London way allotment tool, so you probably will be okay. Mulch topper bucket with rapeseed straw used as horse bedding, says Nicola. Toby Stream says, I might try and grow a few in my compost heap, might save a load of work. Good idea. Good idea. Somebody's done that before, actually, growing in the compost heap, and it worked quite well. Digwell says, I chit first earlies and second earlies, but not main crop. No need with a main crop. They are in the ground for 22 weeks or so. The idea of chitting is get the spuds started so it helps with the first earlies and second earlies. Again, I don't disagree with you. Farmers don't chit their potatoes at the end of the day. But for me, and I found this, and I think I say this every year, the reason I do chit, I put my potatoes in the greenhouse in order to chit, is because they're going to, unless I put them somewhere really cool but really dark, they're going to produce chits. And what we don't want when it comes to chits is those long spindly chits. We want them to be small but strong, compact, tough. So I tend to do that. SO3 is sulfur trioxide. Yeah, what's it used for? Scott says, what was the spray called that you sprayed on seed potatoes when chitting? It worked well for me, but can't remember what it was called. That was Rutilizer from Andermatt. We got some of that last year, actually, and that worked quite well. Turbo Stream says, it's been cold all week here. Only got to 1 degree C this week after frost most of last week. It is cold. It is colder today, certainly. I was waiting for this. Farmers do chip potatoes. Do they? I thought it would be difficult for them to pot the potatoes into the ground if they are chitted. That's why I thought they didn't, because they tend to use a machine that just pots them in the ground. I don't know if we got our farmer people there. Who knows? Lowers the pH, SO3. There we go. Andermatt, says Nigel. Absolutely. Andermatt, and it was called Rutilizer. Did anybody use Rutilizer last year? Obviously, Scott said he did, and it made a difference. What have we got? Also, Turbo Stream says the spray was called seed potato spray. No, it was Rutilizer. Just looking at the time, let's go to the challenge of the week, because this is a good one, actually. This how I can re-handle the trugs that we use. Okay, so this week's challenge is with these plastic trugs. Pretty much sure that everybody has used these at some point in the garden, but what always happens is the handles on these snap off. So we don't like waste in this household. How can we rescue these so that they are still usable? Got a drill. This is quite a rusty 22mm drill bit. We just simply drill one hole there, and we're going to do the same there. Repeat on the other side. So 1, 2, but it doesn't end there. If I can just get in my pocket, I'm going to have to stand up for this. There we go. A knife, and we just cut. Didn't quite work. I got a little bit too far with it. Got a little bit not quite right, but we just cut that off there. Cut that off. Last little cut. There we go. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't quite a clean cut. Didn't quite work out as well as I hoped there. We'll try again on this side and see if we can get a little bit better. Again, it's not quite a clean cut. Don't really shoot this knife is sharp. Not quite as clean a cut as I would like, but it has made a nice little handle on that one. But we can do better. Okay, so this time, slightly smaller drill bit, roughly in the same place again. This time it's a 13mm drill bit. One hole there, and one hole there. What I'm going to do, we've got some bit of rope. We're going to pass that through there. We'll tie a knot in this end. Just make sure that's tight. Same through there. And there we go. One handle. Do the same on this side. Which just trying to make sure they're all in roughly the same place. I think the rope way is the better way, in all honesty. But however, if you've got any ways that you think you can add a handle to one of these trucks after they've broken off, let us know in the comments as well. This last piece just goes through there. Like so. There we go. Perfectly usable rope handle trugs. 2 of them now back in use. Back to the studio. Now indeed, that is 2 trugs back in use. Now, Nigel, Muddy Roots, actually sent me this photo of a bit of an improvement that he did. I forgot to upload this, sorry Nigel. But what he's used there is a bit of hose pipe on that rope handle to make it a little bit more comfortable as well, which is a great idea. The first method that I did was actually an idea I saw with somebody who used an oscillating saw to cut the handle out, which might be a bit of a better straighter way of doing it. It did work. It just, the knife was so sharp that it went a bit too far off at an angle and didn't quite make as clean a cut as I like. However, we've rescued those 2 trugs from going in the bin just by adding new handles. They're usable once again. Now, back to the comments. Digwell says, look for a video for the Jersey Royals. They chit 4 million a year. But Margaret says, no chitting at her farm when she worked on a farm. It would take forever. Seed potatoes straight in the ground. That's what I thought. But I'm wondering if a Jersey Royals, because they're a premium crop, they tend to give them a little bit more care, I wonder. Digwell's going to DM me the link and says they are machine planted after. Rob says, so he does. What's that? Nicola says, if you put old hose pipe or piece of hole hoop, reduces the cutting in of the rope. Yeah, if you put old hose pipe or piece of hole hoop, reduces the cutting in of the and Digraz also said the rope method with hose pipe. Damn, beat me to it. Sorry, Nigel did send me that picture with that as well. It's a good idea. I mean, we don't like waste in this household, so the fact that we can use those trugs again and again is going to be another good one. Another good reason, it means we're going to keep those trugs. They're going to be usable and reduces waste. Margaret says Jersey Royals are only grown in New Jersey, of course, and they are grown on slopes to make planting by hand easier. They also use seaweed from the sea in horse manure, if I remember correctly, too. Digwell says, rearrange Joe's word, yours up. Something going on there. I've got no idea either. I'm losing it a little bit. No, I'm a bit behind with the videos because we have one more video to go, which actually I think I need to get up now. And this is the new feature that we're adding called Richard Rants. This is my weekly opportunity to have a bit of a rant about something. But don't forget, I need a challenge for next week. I want you guys to think about a challenge for next week. I think we're doing the lasagna for the recipe, but I need a challenge for next week as well, something you can really tackle me with. But we've got the rants, and this is my choice of a rant for this week. Well, this week sees the start of our new feature called Richard Rants. Hopefully, I've been able to create a nice little jingle about this. But what am I ranting about today? There was quite a few things that I could have ranted about, but I've tied it down to just one thing. And I've tied it down to this one thing because just the other week we were talking about how I use carnivorous plants to protect some of my young seedlings, some of my young plants, in both indoors and outdoors in the greenhouse and places like that. I'm a big fan of carnivorous plants. So I went into a garden centre for my lunch, as I quite often do. I quite like popping into a garden centre. And of course, there's a bargain discount section where they often sell off plants quite cheap. And anybody that's listened to the podcast will know I'm a big fan of raiding these discount sections. I get a lot of plants that way, bring them home, care for them, and I usually bring them back to life. Some of my plants in the past have cost me just 10p. Now, what I noticed in this section this week was there was 8 carnivorous plants, 8 Venus flytraps in this particular area, and they were priced at £1.29p, discounted down to just £1.29p. They should have been £12.99. So you might be wondering, what are you moaning about? You got some plants cheap. You got 8 Venus flytraps for less than the price it would have cost you to buy one at full price. So here's my rant. Usually carnivorous plants in a garden centre retail for about £7-8, depending of course the garden centre and things like that. These ones, because they had a packaging that was related to some kids film out last year, they had bumped up the price from £8 to £12.99. You know, that's a £5 increase, all because it had some nice packaging related to some kids film that was out last year. And of course, they didn't sell. Who's going to buy a carnivorous plant, a Venus flytrap, for $12.99 just because it's got some nice packaging, when on the same shelf they are selling the same plant for £8? Just doesn't make sense. That's why they didn't sell. It's simple, really, isn't it? It's so simple. I think it was... Let me get my words out. I think it was specifically aimed to try and attract the kids who had seen the film and wanted that particular plant. Now, the other complaint I have about this is, of course, they've discounted them down to £1.29. Great, I'm happy with that. I've got some decent plants for a very cheap price. But that packaging, the pots just pop out of it. I'm literally going to pop them out of this packaging, pop them up into a bigger pot, and there we go. I've got some cheap plants. And if I was that minded, I could sell these plants on maybe £5, £6, £7, £8 myself if I was that way inclined. Does it make sense? In the olden days, a nursery would be seeing this opportunity. People that actually knew how to grow plants would see this opportunity and would not waste a plant and all the packaging and things like that. But because it's a garden centre, and you know my thoughts on many garden centres, I don't think all the people that work there necessarily have the time or the inclination to not be so wasteful. So they just sold them off cheap, and they probably made a loss at the same time. To me, it's just common sense. We could have saved packaging. We didn't need to rip customers off. It's so simple. What do you think on this very subject? Let me know in the comments. Indeed, that was my rant for the week. This is a new feature we added after you guys decided last week. I think it's got a lot of fun. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a eye-opener into how we're going with this. I've got more to come. I've been making a list of some of the things I want to rant about. Where were we? Digwell says, look at the video, Margaret. The Jersey Royals are grown in tunnels now. Interesting, didn't know that. And my local farm buys in pre-chitted spuds. Interesting how times change, isn't it? Digwell says there was a video about those Venus flytrap plants and its promotion. It flopped big time and 90% were sold off cheap. People was not as stupid as they thought. LOL. Thank you. That was my entire rant. There we go. It flopped. Why would you buy a plant for $12.99 when next to it is the same plant for £8? It just, can you send me the link for that video, Digwell? That is interesting. That's really piqued my interest. Nigel says, like most things in life, once a new season appears, the dated stuff is in the way. I agree. Like I said, I just popped those plants out and they were already in a pot. Just got to put a label on them and they could have sold them for £8 with the rest. And that would have reduced the amount of waste. Here we go. My blood's starting to boil. Nigel says, Easter eggs have replaced the Christmas decks in my garden centre. Yeah, ridiculous, isn't it, in some ways, how they're coming along. I hate it. I think garden centres should be about Christmas. Garden centres should be about Christmas. No, garden centres should be about gardens. That's another rant. Greg says, Mello has joined. Hi all, finally got to the allotment this year and started repairing the greenhouse on the plot. Only 5 planes needed to cut to size. Is a glass fun to cut? The tools look cheap to do it. The tools are cheap. You just got to be confident. Make sure your tools are sharp. Your glass cutter is sharp. Put plenty of blankets down. And if you can get a bit of scrap glass just to practice with first, I highly recommend you do that as well, because it is hard just to get that confidence just right when you cut glass. So much words going on there. Take a bit of scrap glass and practice before you do the cuts. My top tip there. Tab Extreme says, if shops price goods properly, then they would sell. My local Aldi has boxes and boxes of chocolates for half price before Christmas. They were obviously too expensive. I totally agree. I totally agree with that. But it's the same, I think I said about Royal Mail. If they made the price of their stamps cheaper, more people would use them. I think people were saying at Christmas that the stamps were more expensive than the Christmas card that went inside it. Old glass can be brittle when cutting. That is something to remember as well, to think about. Yeah, old glass can be brittle, but if it's just to get your confidence in, I highly recommend just practicing, because I learned the hard way with glass. It is a bit of a confidence issue. Got loads of scrap glass. Thanks for the response. You're welcome, Greg. And Turbo Stream says, wear gloves, Greg. Nicholas says, any photos? Yep, I'll be coming to the photos in a minute. The conversation didn't a bit long to get all of everything in. Maybe this is why Dobby's had to sell off many outlets. Poor plants and too many concessions in store, not making money. Absolutely. Absolutely. That does not surprise me one bit. As I said, I would not spend $12.99 on a Venus flytrap. Not when it's been sold for $8.99, but I would spend £1.29 quite happily, and I would buy 8 of them for less than the price of $12.99. And I'm hoping I'm going to just take apart. I'm going to try and get more plants. I'm going to take one of those pots and see if we can split the ribosome on those, so we can get 2 plants out of one carnivorous plant. That might be an idea for a challenge for the next week. If anybody has any ideas for a challenge or a mission that I can do for this next week. Greg says, I remember what my grandpa said about garden centres. Always said they were never meant for growing anything cheaply. Now I see what he meant. He loved buying seeds at Wilkinson's. Garden centres are a business. Garden centres are a business. We've got to bear that in mind. And garden industry as a whole, people don't like spending money on their gardens in the same way they would spend, I don't know how much a new kitchen is these days, 20 grand, I suppose. People would happily spend 20 grand on a kitchen or 10 grand on a front room, but would balk at the idea of even spending £1,000 in their garden. There is an element of that goes into play, and the garden industry does need it. That being said, I think they got it round the wrong way. Gardeners are looking at saving money, so we should be monopolising the way that they can save in money. Things like rooting hormone and things like that should be promoted as a way of taking cuttings. Digwell says, many garden centres will be restocking peat compost very soon. We'll see on that. I'm not sure. I know there's a lot of change in the year, but we'll see what happens with garden centres. Nigel says the divide between garden centres and plant nurseries has never been further apart. I agree. I totally agree. I do like a good plant nursery. They're just so few and far between these days. Now let's quickly go to the photos quickly. Anybody's got any ideas of a challenge? Don't forget, we need an idea for a challenge. I've just got to bring this over onto the bigger screen because I can't see what I'm doing otherwise. So this photo comes from Philly, and it's a shipyard gardener. They have been making these lovely signs for their allotment. Great thing to do while it is in that cold, wet months, isn't it? Good to make use of time. Next, Nicola, she had this marigold flowering on her allotment. Marigold, of course, must have survived the winter months. Well, we are in winter at the moment, but survived it so far, and it even started flowering. Admittedly, we did have a bit of warm weather, warm snap last week for this time of year, but we're back to cold. So there is that going on as well. Starting to see a lot of tulips and daffodils are starting to show themselves at the moment in my area anyway. Kate has started sowing some celery. She says it's a bit of a nemesis, a bit of a problem growing celery. And I think Digwell said he has the same problem. It is a tricky one. It's one of the hardest to grow celery, but don't let that stop you. Give it a try. Let us know how it goes on. She's also, I normally don't share 2 photos, but she's also germinated some mint seeds in her hydroponic system too. As you can see, these are the mint seeds growing. Mint, very, very tiny little seed, but I'm really impressed with this. Great stuff indeed. Steve has also got some carnivorous plants. I've just been talking about those. As I can see here, there's a Venus flytrap and a sundew in this lot. He was really pleased with the packaging. It came from a Hampshire carnivorous plants company or something like that. Really impressed with the packaging. I normally see those at Gardener's World as well. Next, Nathan's chilies are go, go, go. He's sown a lot of chili seeds in this lot. These are obviously in a heated propagator to get them growing, but they are sown and underway, looking good as well. Lots of different chili seeds on the go. Now, Nigel, with his very last cabbage that he's harvested, he looks very happy in that photo, doesn't he? It also looks like he's wrapped up quite nice and warm. But cabbage, a winter stalwart, a winter vegetable that we have to have. Now, Steve has found a lynx in among his brassicas. He's hoping it's going to keep down with the amount of vermin on his allotment, shall we say, and keep them away. We shall see. There was recently some lynxes released up in Scotland, I believe. Perhaps there's a connection here. Perhaps Steve knows more than what he's letting on. And finally, Beddoes has sent some of his usual humour. He says, thank goodness his seed catalogues finally arrived. He was so bored he nearly cleaned the house. Tough times indeed. Now, please do keep sharing your photos. We absolutely love seeing them. You can post them in our Facebook group. We just search for the Veg Grower Podcast if you're not already a member of our Facebook group. Send to me via social media. Just simply contact me on social media. I'm on pretty much every platform. Or you can email me, richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. That's email richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. We're actually going into overtime at the moment. I'm just waiting for an idea for the challenge. Where do we go? The chain garden centres cannot stand the loss of custom to the independents who have never stopped selling peat. Big bucks in compost sales. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm not counting my chickens just yet. Nigel says, we'll be doing a celery in my Growing Made Easy series soon. Look forward to seeing that, actually. Look forward to seeing that indeed. Digwa says, we'll check it out, buddy, to Nigel. Toby Stream says, no idea on the challenge. Sorry, I have a fence to mend, so you're welcome to pop up and assist. I haven't got time to pop up. The journey's in the way. I have a few fly traps and pitcher plants. Remember to water from the bottom and do not use tap water. I use rainwater. Absolutely right. Rainwater all the way from the bottom. Love that pic, says Rob. I think that's talking about Nigel there. Nicholas says, make a vertical planter from a drain pipe. A vertical planter from a drain pipe. Okay, that sounds like an idea. I think it's the only one we've got so far. Or Nigel says, go find a garden centre selling peat-based compost. That might be an easier one. But what do you guys think? We got a vertical planter or the peat-based compost? Or Tabby Stream says, challenge to think up a challenge. You need an emergency challenge list. I need you guys to think more about a challenge during the week. Hello, Roxy. This should be on the front of your brains, front of your minds, all throughout the week. What are you going to challenge Richard with this week? There will not be a second reading of the peat bill. It has been for food. Planter for me, says Dig. Well, that's 2 votes for the planter. While you quickly get your votes in, I'm going to start wrapping up because, as I said, we are in overtime. I'm out of coffee. I need another cup. I want to jump in the bath as well. Another vote for vertical planter from Hargrave. It looks like we're going to be doing the vertical planter. But Nigel, keep that challenge. Remind us next week. That might be another option. Right, I am going to wrap this one up for this week. We'll be back again next Sunday at 6. What are we going to talk about next Sunday at 6? I'll tell you what I want to talk about. Grow lights and heated propagators. What are your recommendations? That's what we're going to talk about. I've made the decision. Another vote for vertical planter. That's what we're going to do. Right, guys, you take care. I'll speak to you again next Sunday at 6. Hang on. I haven't set myself up ready to go. See you next Sunday at 6.